Have you ever heard of a king with extraordinary wisdom, but lost everything because of 1,000 women? This is the story of Solomon, the smartest, richest, and most powerful king in biblical history. He transformed Israel into a mighty empire, trading with the whole world. But it was a dark secret in his harem that opened the way to tragedy. Beneath the golden light of the dynasty, there was a maze of temptations, 300 concubines and 700 concubines, each with a story, a plot. Egyptian princesses with mysterious eyes, enchanting Moabite beauties, women of Ammon, Edom, and Sidon, all were caught in the power play of the royal harem. Solomon's harem descended into a maze of political intrigue and precarious alliances. Solomon sealed pacts guaranteeing peace for his kingdom with each marriage, and each woman brought a bit of her own country, transforming the palace into a living tapestry of mixed civilizations. These unions, however, were a two-edged blade, since they also brought the gods and customs of their nations, so subverting Israel's pure faith. So was his fall related to his harem of 1,000 women? From his great legacy of wisdom to his demise, Solomon's story will be explored in this film. Could he truly subjugate the demons? What effects of his passing affected the kingdom of Israel? Remember to subscribe to this channel and activate alerts to avoid missing any amazing biblical narratives. Starting in the ancient city of Jerusalem in 990 BC, let us follow the birth of a fresh prince. Solomon was his name, which suggests friend of God and peace. From the marriage between Bathsheba and King David, the courageous shepherd who vanquished Goliath and whom you have surely heard about, Solomon was conceived. But Solomon's narrative started with a sinister secret: the adulterous relationship between King David and Bathsheba, then married to Uriah the Hittite, a courageous soldier in David's army. Desperate to hide his sin, the king dispatched Uriah to fight and gave orders for the other troops to abandon him defenseless on the battlefield. Uriah died in combat, as was to be expected. But God's eyes were not blind to the king's deeds. Considered as divine judgment, the death of David and Bathsheba's first son was a penalty for the committed adultery. But God showed his pity among regret and sorrow. From that reconciliation between heaven and earth, Solomon was born. He forgave King David. A smart and mysterious man tuteled the young prince growing up. Nathan the prophet. As King David handled the affairs of the kingdom, Nathan became Solomon's mentor and guide. Profoundly teaching and revealing divine revelations shapes his mind and spirit. With his cool voice and sharp eyes, Nathan sensed Solomon's remarkable fate. The prophet saw the promise of greatness and the spark of wisdom burning in the heart of the young prince. Then, though, Nathan started to create a daring scheme. The prophet was aware that Solomon was not the firstborn of King David, and that older brothers might be claiming the kingdom. And Nathan, too, carried a sinister secret. He understood the whole tale of the adultery between David and Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. Nathan chose to take advantage of this knowledge with slyness and will. Nathan started sowing in private audiences with King David the belief that Solomon was meant to be the heir to the throne. The prophet persuaded the king that selecting Solomon was God's will, with well-selected words and prophecies. David started thus gradually to see in his younger son the promise of a great future. David got the strength he needed to reiterate his choice and name Solomon as his official successor when he became sick and his death neared. But the young Solomon, just 15 years old, knew his rule was born under threat. His ears echoed the warning words of his father, reminding him to be alert against possible adversaries who might plot against him. And so Solomon started a protracted purge to ensure his power resolved beyond his years. Among the first casualties of the purge was Joab, David's main general who had backed Adonijah's throne claim. Solomon thus made it abundantly evident that none was safe from his merciless justice. Then he eliminated Adonijah, so depriving any chance for a conspiracy against him. But the young king continued beyond that. Solomon set out to increase the military force of the kingdom and started forming an alliance with the strong Pharaoh of Egypt, having a strategic vision that exceeded his age. He thus chose the Pharaoh's daughter as his first wife, so completing a contract guaranteeing to deepen relations between the two countries. The marriage with the Egyptian princess, covered in exotic jewels and silks, proved successful. Sadly, Solomon believed that the fastest approach to expand his kingdom was to unite with strong women from different worlds. Later on, this idea would torment him. On a quiet night, though, the young King Solomon sank into a deep and exposing dream while he slept. God said to Solomon, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you in this dream." He showed up before him with a resonant grace. With a modest heart, knowing of the enormous responsibility resting on him, Solomon answered, "You have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and honest in heart. Thus, equip your servant with a discriminating heart to rule your people and to separate right from wrong, since who is able to rule this great people of yours?" Solomon's ask delighted the Lord, since he understood his pure heart and his will to rule with wisdom. God, delighted, answered, "Since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have you asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment in distributing justice, I will do what you have asked. I will equip you with a smart and discriminating heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, or will ever be." Solomon woke from his dream, carrying with him the most valuable gift a king could want, the wisdom and discernment God himself had bestowed upon him. With this divine meeting, Solomon's life underwent a sea change, and he could lead his people with justice, compassion, and unmatched understanding. Legendary wisdom from Solomon attracted people from all countries, yearning to hear his words and absorb his knowledge. As it is recorded, every king on the planet sought Solomon's presence in order to hear the wisdom God had stored in his heart. This wisdom was evident on a remarkable day when two women claimed to be the mothers of the same baby before King Solomon. Each told her version of the story, screaming for justice and acknowledgement of her motherhood while tears in their eyes and shaking voices. Ignorant of the conflict, the infant rested in the arms of one of the women while the strain in the throne room was clearly felt. Solomon listened carefully to both women using the knowledge God had given him. Then he issued a decree shocking everyone present with a sharp glance and a firm voice. "Bring me a sword. Cut the living child in half and distribute half to half." As the guests held their breath at the king's startling proposition, a sepulchral silence crept into the chamber. Then, "Ah, my lord, give her the living child and do not kill it." The true mother of the child, with her heart torn and love bursting from her being, cried out. The other woman, on the other hand, embraced the split of the baby with disturbing coldness. Solomon then delivered his last decision: "She is his mother. Give the live child to her and do not kill it." Wisdom of the king had triumphed, revealing the truth and defending the life of the innocent. Inspired by pure love, the real mother had chosen to renounce her son instead of see him die. The impostor had shown her lack of mother affection and sensitivity. The people of Israel were astounded at the divine wisdom that lived in their king, as word of this remarkable decision quickly got out over the kingdom. As it is recorded, "And all Israel heard of the judgment the king had rendered. They feared the king, since they knew that God's wisdom was in him to administer justice." This episode turned into a monument to the wisdom and sense of taste God had given Solomon. His people respected and admired him for his capacity to apply justice with wisdom and compassion, so strengthening his rule and leaving a legacy spanning generations. Still, the people stayed anchored in old customs. As a temple dedicated to Jehovah had not yet been built, they gave their sacrifices in great heights on improvised altars under the open sky. Solomon then set out to construct Israel's first temple, but he lacked the means to realize his ideal grand temple at that point. Then he set out to create a strategic alliance with Tyre's king, Hiram, a city known for its wealth in natural resources and construction ability. Solomon dispatched messengers to Hiram, carrying a daring offer. "You know that the wars fought against my father David from all sides prevented him from erecting a temple for the name of the Lord his God, until the Lord laid his enemies under his feet. Now, however, the Lord my God has granted me rest on all sides. There is no enemy or disaster. As the Lord advised my father David when he said, 'Your son, whom I will place on the throne in your place, will build the temple for my name.' I thus intend to erect a temple bearing the name of the Lord my God." Seeing Solomon's brilliance, Hiram quickly embraced the idea and promised to supply the required cypress and cedar wood, as well as the expert work of his talented craftspeople. Solomon would thus establish a mutually beneficial trade by sending food and other goods to Tyre. Solomon started building the Jerusalem temple with the tools acquired thanks to the cooperation with Hiram, an effort spanning 7 years. Following divine direction, the building was executed with unparalleled accuracy and beauty. The temple King Solomon constructed for the Lord measured 60 cubits long, 20 wide, 30 high as written. From the basis to the most delicate decorations, every element of the temple was meticulously designed and carried out. Cedar wood lined the walls, and pure gold covered every surface to create an ethereal sacred space never seen elsewhere. He thus constructed the temple and finished it, roofing it with beams and cedar planks, and he created the side rooms all around. Each stood 5 cubits, and beams of cedar held them fast to the temple. Still, Solomon's vision extended beyond the temple. For 13 years, the king also devoted himself to building his own palace, a grand construction reflecting his wealth and authority. Still, Solomon needed 13 years to finish building his palace. With roomy halls, imposing columns, and rich gardens, Solomon's palace was an architectural wonder. Every element was intended to magnificence the king and reflect his glory. From the outside to the great courtyard and from foundation to eaves, all these buildings, from foundation to eaves, were built of blocks of high-grade stone cut to size and polished on their inner and outside faces. The building of the temple in Solomon's palace not only changed Jerusalem's physical environment, but also solidified Israel's economic might. Then, the popularity of Solomon's riches and wisdom spread like wildfire over the known planet. From far-off countries, kings and queens yearned to meet the fabled ruler who had turned Israel into a rich and strong country. Among them, the Queen of Sheba caught out one for her boldness and will. Enthralled with the tales she had heard, the Queen of Sheba set off an epic trip to see Solomon personally. Arriving in Jerusalem driven to challenge the king's wisdom, she had an amazing entourage and exotic gifts. But Solomon answered every queen's query with startling clarity and depth, using his mental acuity and divine knowledge. The queen was astounded, since Solomon's knowledge exceeded her expectations. She told the king, "It is true what I heard in my land about your affairs and your wisdom, but I did not believe it until I came. My eyes have seen that not even half was told to me. Your wisdom and virtue surpassed the renown I had heard." Still, Solomon's wisdom was only one remarkable quality. His splendor and riches were equally fable-like. His kingdom was rich in gold, silver, and precious stones. His throne was a work of ivory and pure gold. Every inch of Israel under Solomon's rule was clearly showing her wealth. Trade boomed and plenty spilled all around. King Solomon's drinking vessels were all fashioned of gold. And similarly, the houseware of the forest of Lebanon was fashioned of exquisite gold. Silver was hardly valued in Solomon's day, thus nothing was made of it. But Solomon was a writer, motivated by God, as well as a smart and rich king. By means of his literary creations, he embodied divine knowledge in terms fit for millennia. Attributed to Solomon, the books of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs became jewels of biblical literature, providing useful guidance, great insights on life, and celebration of pure love. In Proverbs, Solomon offered pearls of wisdom meant to direct next generations. Knowledge starts with the fear of the Lord, yet fools hate knowledge and instruction. He considered in Ecclesiastes the fleeting character of life and the need of seeking God. All has been heard now. This sums up the situation. Fear God and follow his instructions. This is the responsibility shared by all people. And in Song of Songs, he honored the beauty of intimacy between a man and a woman. For love is as strong as death, its jealousy relentless as the tomb. Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal over your arm. It burns like a great flame, like a flaming fire. Thus the wise and rich King Solomon left a legacy that would span generations, evidence of God's favor on a man seeking truth and justice in a society sometimes engulfed in darkness. Still, Solomon made a big error among his brilliance and knowledge. He gave in to a want that would send him down a perilous road. The king was enthralled with the love of foreign women, despite God's warnings, building a harem unmatched in history. According to what is known, he had 300 concubines and 700 wives of royal birth. His wives brought him astray. Within the magnificent palace of King Solomon, a labyrinth of stone and cedar concealed a secret as great as his wisdom. A harem of 1,000 women, from Ethiopian princesses with black skin to the daughters of pharaohs whose eyes held the secrets of the Nile. Each woman was a world, a narrative, an enigma the king delighted in learning and knowing. Every inch of the palace echoed their laughter, whispers, and songs. These were not just shadows in his court. Every found her place in the large political and cultural tapestry of the kingdom. Through them, Solomon spun enduring alliances, created peace with far-off worlds, and expanded his knowledge of the peoples and civilizations encircling his map. But this network of ties was also a minefield of intrigues and jealousies, where every favor from the king could fan rivalries silently in the hallways, covered with exotic hangings. But the splendor of his court and the variety of his harem also brought shadows. With their priestesses and ceremonies, foreign gods entered Jerusalem and subverted the strong monotheistic faith of the Israeli people. While Solomon, caught in the web of his marital alliances, found himself progressively far from the laws of his ancestors, statues of Ashtoreth and Baal started to show in high places, originally erecting altars to Astarte, Milcom, and Molech, abominable gods of neighboring countries. Solomon, the man who had built the great temple in Jerusalem to honor the God of Israel, now found himself building grenades. His heart had become corrupted by idolatry, so separating him from the divine wisdom that had once set him apart. Then the Lord, witnessing Solomon's wayward heart, grew sad and angry. Those who had been blessed with unrivaled knowledge and riches had turned from their obligations and given their allegiance to the worship of false gods. In his righteous indignation, God confronted Solomon and cautioned him of the results of his activities. "I will most certainly separate the kingdom from you and send it to one of your subordinates, since this is your attitude, and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees which I commanded you." Solomon listened to God's warning as deafening thunder. After his death, the kingdom he had created with such wisdom and diligence would be split and handed to others. In the country that had once been one under his rule, disobedience and idolatry had bred strife and fragmentation. The intelligent and rich King Solomon had given in to temptation and veered off course. For next generations, his example would serve as a warning, reminding them that even the smartest and most strong are prone to sin when they reject God's will. One of the books credited to Solomon, according to Proverbs, seems to be right at first, but finally results in death. At this point, the results of Solomon's idolatry and disobedience were not far off. From both inside and outside his realm, enemies emerged trying to take advantage of the king's weakness for their own benefit. Among them, Jeroboam was a servant of Solomon who had been covertly anointed by the prophet Ahijah to rule over 10 tribes of Israel. As it is recorded, he said, "Take 10 pieces for yourself. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. See, I am going to hand Solomon 10 tribes and rip the kingdom from his hand." Knowing his destiny as a prophet, Jeroboam disobeyed Solomon and looked for chance to grab the kingdom from him. Division and strife now jeopardized the wisdom and wealth that had defined Solomon's rule. But in a flash of insight and contrition, Solomon turned his heart toward God, seeing the vanity of his earthly wants and the futility of his idolatry. A moving monument to his search for direction and meaning in life, the wise king poured his soul into the book of Ecclesiastes. Words loaded with wisdom and passion, Solomon considered the fleeting character of human life. Says the teacher, meaningless, useless, totally useless, all is useless. By means of his writings, the king revealed his inner conflicts, his disappointments, and his final realization that only in God can actual fulfillment and the essence of life be discovered. A reminder to next generations that the search of happiness in material goods and worldly pleasures is finally useless and empty. Ecclesiastes became the legacy of Solomon's wisdom. We cannot discover the peace and direction we so yearn for until we center God in our life. Solomon, the wise and wealthy king, passed away 40 years into his rule. Solomon left behind a legacy of splendor and wisdom, as well as a kingdom on the verge of collapse when he closed his eyes for the last time. Rehoboam, his son, ascended to the throne and inherited a kingdom already rife with strife and fragmentation. With Solomon dead, an era of unparalleled beauty and wisdom in Israel came to an end. Still, his legacy would live through his works and the lessons his life had taught. Notwithstanding his flaws and errors, Solomon would always be regarded as a king whose wealth and wisdom had illuminated the planet and whose atonement had underlined the need of keeping God at the forefront of our life. One more shocking element about Solomon's narrative, though, comes from apocryphal texts and writings such as the Testament of Solomon rather than from the Bible. These customs hold that Solomon possessed a magical ring called the Ring of Solomon, in addition to being a wise king and great builder. The archangel Michael allegedly handed him this ring, which would enable him to call forth, rule, and banish demons. Among other things, Solomon used these abilities to force the demons to help build Jerusalem's temple or complete chores. These stories have symbolism and should be seen within their religious and cultural setting. They capture the curiosity and fascination with supernatural ability, attributing to Solomon's talents, so enhancing his already legendary wisdom and power. Solomon's narrative thus became a monument to the ups and downs of human life, how even the wisest and most powerful can fall into temptation and sin, but also how God's grace and forgiveness are always available to those who repent and seek his face. Solomon's extraordinary wisdom did not come without context. His mother, Bathsheba, was instrumental in both his personal growth and his rule. She is also a major player in both Solomon's character and kingship, were much shaped by her observations and direction. But Bathsheba's narrative also shows the seed of lust that tormented Solomon and his father David, so highlighting a recurring theme whereby power and desire can produce both rulers and conflict. Clicking on the Bathsheba video will reveal how this powerful woman not only molded a king's wisdom, but also reflected the very difficulties he faced.